Imagine that every time you feel a stab of envy, a flash of rage, or the quiet ache of restlessness, you are being handed a compass you did not know you owned. Most of us treat these moments as malfunctions, evidence that something inside us needs to be fixed or deleted. Carl Jung suggested the opposite. The irritation, the compulsion, the overreaction are not bugs in our programming. They are signals from a region of the psyche we have exiled from daylight. He called this region the shadow, and he believed that learning to read its messages is the single most practical way to transform inner friction into forward motion. Begin with a simple premise. The personality you presented at this morning's meeting, or at last week's family dinner, is a partial draft. It contains the traits you have approved of, the emotions your culture rewarded, the ambitions you could admit without embarrassment. Every quality that threatened acceptance, whether it was too loud, too soft, too strange, too selfish, was quietly trimmed away. Yet nothing psychological is ever deleted. It is only placed in the basement. Down there, the rejected characteristics reorganize into a second self, equal in mass to the first, operating by its own rules. The shadow is not a dungeon of evil. It is a storeroom of everything you needed to survive, including strengths you mistook for liabilities and appetites you were taught to call shameful. Jung's language is precise. In the collected works, he writes that the shadow is the thing a person has no wish to be. Notice the double meaning. It is both what we refuse to see and what we refuse to become. A child scolded for crying learns to label tenderness weak. The tenderness does not dissolve, it emigrates. A teenager praised only for perfect scores learns to hide curiosity that wanders off the syllabus. That curiosity goes underground. Over decades, the split widens. The public self grows polished, while the counterpart grows raw, hungry, and occasionally vengeful. When the two sides meet, usually in the dark, usually under stress, the encounter feels like possession. You say, "I wasn't myself," yet you were more yourself than you care to admit. The first hint that a shadow exists is the ease with which you spot it in others. Jung called this projection, the psyche's oldest magic trick. The qualities you cannot acknowledge inside are flung outward and plastered onto whoever stands nearest. The colleague you despise for being shamelessly self-promoting may simply carry the confidence you surrendered in order to be liked. The stranger who fills you with inexplicable unease might wear the very vulnerability you swore never to display. Projection is flawless in its aim. It always finds a willing carrier. The giveaway is intensity. When your reaction is 3 degrees hotter than the situation warrants, the extra heat belongs to you. A second hint arrives as disproportionate effect, the psychological term for a mood that outweighs its trigger. A driver cuts you off, and for the next 20 minutes, your heart races as though the insult were mortal. A friend forgets to text back, and a gray fog settles over the entire afternoon. These spikes are not about traffic etiquette or phone manners. They are ruptures in the floorboards through which the basement breathes. The ego experiences the surge as alien. Why am I like this? Because it has never filed the rejected traits under its own name. Dreams offer a third mirror. During sleep, the sensor relaxes, and shadow figures walk on stage. They often appear as pursuers, intruders, or strangers of the same sex as the dreamer, carrying an energy both menacing and magnetic. A man who prides himself on stoic logic dreams of a laughing woman who floods the house. She is the emotional fluency he has never allowed himself. A woman who survives on cheerful competence dreams of a hooded figure who burns her calendars. He is the chaos that might free her from perfectionism. Jung advised recording these figures verbatim before the day's ego reasserts its edits. The dream does not command you to become the stranger. It asks you to hold a conversation across the border. Once the signals are noticed, the real work begins. Integration, the slow reunion of the official self with its exiled kin. Jung named this lifelong process individuation, not self-improvement but self-completion. The goal is not to dissolve the ego or to glorify the shadow, but to widen the circle of identity until both sides can coexist under one roof. Imagine a parliament where the conservative majority must finally listen to the opposition benches. Policies change, budgets reallocate, and the nation discovers it possesses resources it had forgotten it owned. Integration starts with observation, so disciplined it borders on devotion. For 1 month, carry a pocket notebook. Each time you feel a surge of heat, judgment, envy, terror, lust, write a single sentence that records only facts. Speaker at conference reminded me of my older brother, wanted to humiliate him. No justification, no self-shaming. You are gathering data, not filing indictments. After 4 weeks, you will possess a topographical map of your personal underground, complete with fault lines and pressure points. Month 2 belongs to dreams. Keep a pad beside the bed. The moment waking returns, jot images before they evaporate. Resist the urge to interpret. Simply list actors, settings, emotions. Underline any figure that repeats or disturbs. Once a week, read the entries aloud and circle verbs. Who chased? Who hid? Who spoke truth? Verbs reveal the shadow's agenda more reliably than nouns. If you dream repeatedly of climbing and falling, the psyche may be dramatizing ambition you deny by day. Month 3 introduces active imagination, Jung's term for a waking dialogue with unconscious figures. Choose one dream character or one projected trait, perhaps the arrogance you keep attributing to coworkers. Sit alone, close your eyes, and picture the quality as a person standing at the edge of an empty stage. Ask, "What do you want from me?" Write the answer without censoring grammar or logic. The first replies may sound juvenile. The psyche speaks the language it first learned. Continue the exchange until the figure offers a request that feels ethically workable. Arrogance might demand you speak once in the next meeting without apologizing beforehand. Accept the experiment, but ground it in reality. Promise one clear sentence, not a hostile takeover. Small ethical experiments are the hinge on which integration turns. The shadow is not redeemed by insight alone. It requires behavior. If your map shows you hoard tenderness, try complimenting a stranger's shoes. If it shows you suppress assertiveness, return the incorrectly cooked steak with courteous firmness. After each action, scan the body for relief or new energy. Success is not applause from others. It is the subtle click of an internal bolt sliding open, the sense that you have ceased betraying yourself. Throughout, distinguish between owning a trait and obeying it. Integration does not grant license to assault, exploit, or wallow. The ego still holds the steering wheel. It simply acquires a wider dashboard. A lifelong people-pleaser who discovers her rage does not start berating loved ones. She learns to say, "I need a boundary here," before resentment calcifies into cruelty. The shadow's energy is borrowed, spent consciously, and paid back as renewed vitality. The rewards accrue in slow coin. First, projections thin out. The colleague you once judged now appears as a complicated human, partly admirable, partly struggling, much like yourself. Second, emotional range widens without flooding. Anger arrives as a clean signal of trespass rather than a septic tide. Third, creativity surfaces in places previously barren. The piano you abandoned at 15 calls again. The business idea you dismissed as impractical resurfaces with a workable plan. Jung spoke of the gold in the shadow, the libido, psychic energy, return to you once it is no longer poured into the upkeep of denial. Most important, the compass begins to steady. Individuation does not hand you a single neon purpose. It equips you to navigate by inner magnetic north. Decisions grow simpler, not because the options shrink, but because the criteria clarify. You choose the job that allows your full voice, the friendship that welcomes your contradiction, the creative risk that once felt like vanity and now feels like oxygen. Meaning becomes a byproduct of alignment, not a prize to be chased. Yet the process is not solitary. Jung warned that the personal shadow, multiplied across millions, feeds collective storms. The nation that refuses to admit its own violence will project evil onto an enemy race. The corporation that cannot acknowledge greed will demonize regulation. Each individual who withdraws a projection dims the cultural fuse by 1 degree. Shadow work is therefore private labor with public consequences. It is the quietest form of citizenship. Proceed with caution. If the basement door bursts open and memories of trauma flood the stairwell, seek a trained therapist. Integration is not a substitute for medical care. It is a long-term lifestyle that proceeds best under gentle supervision. Likewise, beware the 2 classic perversions, wallowing in darkness as a counterfeit depth and glorifying darkness as an excuse for harm. The ego's task is to hold the tension of opposites until a third, unexpected solution appears, what Jung called the transcendent function. Neither capitulation to impulse nor repression of it, but a new stance that includes both and transcends both. Keep the pace human. 1 insight per season is abundance. The measure of progress is not how saintly you feel, but how seldom you must say, "I wasn't myself." When you can admit, "That was me, angry, petty, afraid, and I survived," the circle of identity widens. The day you greet your own shadow with the same courtesy you extend to a guest, you will discover the house of your psyche has more rooms than you ever imagined, and every one of them is lit. Month 4 widens the experiment. Choose one relationship that feels stale. Perhaps a sibling you greet with polite exhaustion. Write down the 3 traits in them that irritate you most. Interrupts, boasts, never asks about me. Then conduct an honest audit. Where do you interrupt, boast, or forget curiosity in your own life? For 1 week, practice the opposite behavior in low-stakes settings. When you catch yourself interrupting, stop mid-sentence and ask the other person to continue. The sibling may not change, but your inner film reel loses its scratch. The scene plays without the old jolt of irritation. Projection recedes, and the actual person, frail, striving, ordinary, becomes visible. Energy returns in unexpected currencies. A tax attorney dreams of a red-haired boy painting murals on subway walls. During active imagination, the boy says, "You died the day you chose safety." The attorney begins sketching again, first in pencil on legal pads, then in acrylic on weekends. A year later, she exhibits in a cafe gallery. Sales are modest, but she wakes without the metallic taste of dread. The shadow has converted repression into renewable fuel. Physical health often improves. Migraines that arrived every Monday slacken once the employee stops volunteering for tasks she secretly resents. Psoriasis that bloomed during a polite, sexless marriage recedes after the couple confronts the anger they feared would destroy them. The body keeps the shadow's ledger. When the psyche rebalances, the body writes new figures. Collective symptoms also ease. A middle manager who integrates his ambition stops undermining subordinates. Team turnover falls. A parent who admits her envy of her teenage daughter's freedom ceases sabotaging the girl's college applications. The daughter's anxiety attacks diminish. One less poison drip into the family river, and downstream ecosystems recover. Yet integration never ends. It only deepens. At midlife, the successful entrepreneur confronts the infantile neediness he hid behind 80-hour weeks. In retirement, the kindly grandmother meets the rage she swallowed to keep the peace. Each new season excavates a deeper stratum. Jung remarked that individuation is less a path than a spiral staircase. You circle back to the same themes, but each time at a higher floor. The final proof is not mystical rapture. It is the quiet ability to live without self-betrayal. You still feel fear, but it no longer masquerades as prudence. You still feel desire, but it no longer dresses up as destiny. You can apologize first, not because you are weak, but because you no longer need to win to feel real. You can stay silent when speech would wound, not because you are saintly, but because the urge to wound has been heard and comforted by an inner parent who finally grew up. And meaning? It shows up as orientation. You may still be a paralegal, or a single father, or a dancer past her physical prime, but the role is no longer a hiding place. It is simply the place where the larger self does today's work. Tomorrow, the work may change. The compass remains. The shadow, once a dungeon, has become the castle's foundation. Descend its stairs not in terror, but to retrieve the next sealed crate labeled with your own handwriting. Open when ready to live more truthfully. The last integration is mortality itself. Jung, dying at 85, told a friend, "Let us quickly finish with the incompleteness." He did not mean perfection. He meant enough honesty to meet death without panic. The shadow, fully faced, leaves no unopened doors for fear to hide behind. When the final night arrives, you will not need to say, "I wasn't myself." You will simply say, "I was, and I am ready to become whatever comes next."